So, hello guys, I have just finished reading this great masterpiece written by John Steinbeck, the American novelist, The Grapes of Wrath. Now, before starting anything, let me just say that this is not an easy read. This, for more than 500 page heavy, thick novel, is something that will stay with me for a long, long period of time, and it has a great depth. I can never do justice if I'll just try to analyze this novel in a small video, or rather, anybody cannot do any justice to it if they try to do so. It's a novel that has lot of depth in it, themes, significance, and all those stuffs. So here I just wrote a few bullet points over here so that I could explain this novel. So first of all, it is based on a family living in Oklahoma, a city in America, and they had to migrate to a place definitely called as California, which is a promised land. Now, why they had to migrate was because they were a family of farmers, and due to the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, they had to leave their own city. And in order to search for work, they had to leave the city in which they lived for hundreds of years. And they got to know that there's a sort of promised land known as California, and over there they'll get to work easily. And so they had to leave. And it was not a smooth transition. Like, it was not a smooth transition like one day they wake up and they thought that, okay, now I don't want to work here, because I am not provided with that kind of living, so we are gonna leave for California. No, like, they struggled to live in their own place because that place was owned by the capitalist people. And when they saw that the farmers are not providing them enough income, and due to the dust bowl they cannot do the farming properly, so they threw them away from their own land. They used tractors and every possible way to just vanish the people out there. And there were not one or two families, there were approx thousands of men, women, children, all they had to deport from their own land. So this was the main crust of this story. So, and in this story, there's one family known as the Jod family, whose narrative is discussed in this novel. And believe me, there could be no other writer than John Steinbeck to display the realities of this time period when the migrants were really in a very vulnerable situation in America. So now let's talk about the Jod family. So in this family we had Ma Jod and Pa Jod, Tom Jod. Like Tom Jod was the son. Then Rose of Shawn was sister of Tom, and few other characters, like there were two children known as Ruthie and Winfield, and there was one uncle John. So this was a complete package of family, and one brother A1, the brother of Tom Jod. So initially we got to see that Tom Jod was in prison, and he was declared guilty due to some of his crime which he did not felt guilty about. Like, we saw in the novel, like, many times he told that if again that situation will arise, I will again commit the same crime, which means that he was not guilty of the crime which he made. And also his family was not at all worried as to he has done such a thing, like maybe he has killed a person. So Tom Joad got his parole and he went out. He came out from jail, and when he reached the land, uh, in the way he met with a preacher known as Jim Casey. He and preacher went to his land, and then he saw that nothing's there. His family and most of the families in the Oklahoma City is moving towards south, which is California, in order to have some living, because the police are not allowing themselves to stay at Oklahoma anymore. And then the journey started. They like, I'm not going to summarize everything because I will not do justice to it. So I'm dividing it into like three broad parts. First, Tom Joad moving to his family, and then they all moving towards California, the journey, and when after they reach that place, that thing. So they found hardship to settle everything over there, and they anyhow started their journey towards California. But The due course of time, they got to know that the situation is really, really worse. Like, there is no job, and if there's some job, then the wages are very low and the prices are very high, because see, everything is supply and demand. If there are hundreds of men for a labor of 10 people, then definitely they're going to be exploited by the capitalists, and everything is going to just go against their will. And the whole highway was filled with people moving towards California. Like, in the day they started their move in their cars or anything, any kind of transport, then in the evening they all sat together. Like, even if people don't know each other, they shared their tents. And on the way, like, on the way, they had grandpa and grandma, they both expired, they both died. First of all, the grandfather died, uh, and then grandmother died. And the situation was such that they had no money to bury them. Like, they had very little money to bury them, and they managed it in that phase. And they had no time to mourn. They had no time to mourn the death of the grandfather and the grandmother. That was the situation of of the family. And on the way, one of the brother left the family. And the sister, Rose of Sean, was pregnant. She was expecting a baby, and his husband, in search of good food, or rather in search of good living, he also vanished from the scene. Though he loved her wife a lot, but seeing the situation, he vanished. And then there was Marjor. Now, what Marjor signifies? Marjor signified in this novel the breaking of patriarchy. See, this was written in 1930s, and Steinbeck is a writer of its time. He will write the things that is going around. So that time in 1930s also sign of huge patriarchy. Like, definitely till now the men are considered superior. So that was approximately 100 years back. But during the course of novel, we see how Marjor gained the power, gained the freedom, and she was the decision maker in the family. Not his son, not his husband, but Marjor was the decision maker of her family. And this Steinbeck does deliberately to criticize the contemporary society of his. Marjor was a lady that would attain anything that life throws towards her. Now they moved to different camps. Uh, they were exploited, and then they found a government camp, a camp where policemen cannot enter. Yes, a camp where people manage themselves all with themselves, and that was the turning point. No, no, that was not a turning point, but they found a government camp, and that camp was like, see, first of all, policemen were not allowed in that camp. Secondly, things were very organized. They got hot water, and everything was quite peaceful there. Through this, Steinbeck shows us that people, the migrants, the lower class people, can also rule themselves. They do not need policemen. That was the only moment where the family was little happy. But that happiness could not last long, because though they had an easy living there, but uh, they had no work. And and in order to search for a work, after a month they had to leave that government camp. And when they left that government camp, that's when the main uh, exploitation started. uh, the preacher which I told you all about, that preacher eventually ended up in jail, because in order to save Tom Joad. Because in one of the camps, the Tom Joad had a little controversy with the policeman. And the preacher put himself in order to save Tom Joad. And at the end, like, at the last camp where they went, Tom Joad saw the preacher. He was leading the strike. He was leading the labor strike in response to the low wages provided to them. And then a person killed the preacher. In order to retaliate, Tom Joad killed the person who killed the preacher. And after that, everything changed. Like, Tom Joad hid himself in a cave, and when Marjod went to visit him, Tom Joad was completely a changed person. Tom Joad was completely a different person. He told that he is going to Tom Joad become a man of flesh and blood too, a man of idea, a complete idea. He told that, Ma, I am going to be there where justice is not served. I am going to be there when the children cry when they are hungry. I'm going to be everywhere. Like Tom Joad transferred to become the preacher. The preacher was like, if you see in the point of view of Christianity, the preacher was the flesh and blood of Christ, and Tom Joad became the divine, the spiritual Christ. And after that, we are not told as to where is Tom Joad, because after that conversation, the individual reality and the physical reality of Tom Joad did not matter, but the mental, the emotional presence of his, the spiritual presence of everywhere where the injustice is served, that matters. And by the end of the novel, we see that the remaining family members were in a cotton camp, like they were picking up cottons, and the area was filled with rain. For 3 to 4 days, there were non-stop rain and flood all around. And at that time, Rose of Shawn delivered. Rose of Shawn was expecting a delivery, and she delivered, but the baby was stillborn. He or she was dead. And the end of the novel is where we all can suffer, we all can get goosebumps. The end of the novel is where we can say that in every difficult circumstances, it is the lower class people, or it is a lower class people who will show more humanity than any other people. It's the people to serve people and not the aristocrats or the capitalists. Like what happened was, near the tent there was a person and his father. There was a boy and his father. The father was starving to death because he had no food since 5 to 6 days, and anything which he got he gave to his son. And because of the rain, there was no work. Definitely rain, no work, no picking. And at the end, Rose of Shawn breastfeeded her milk to the man to save his life. And the novel ended there. Now, that is one of the most powerful and most, I don't know, I have no words to explain that scene, because that scene just gave me goosebumps. Like after reading all this long book, and the last page, the second last and the last page, page 3 for 35 and 334 in this book, just changed the complete narrative, because from the starting to the end, Rose of Shawn was a conservative girl. You can call it a selfish girl, but at the end, her her whole perspective of her character changed. Let me read you the last line of this book. There, she said, there. Her hand moved behind his head and supported it. Her finger moved gently in his hair. She looked up and across the pond. Her lips came together and smiled mysteriously. That's where the novel ends. She smiled mysteriously. Now one can figure out what was that mysterious smile. But this is how Steinbeck wanted to end this novel open endedly. Now, after reading this novel, one would want to know that, did the Joad family survive? What happened? Where did Tom Joad go after that conversation? And uh, did his husband, Rose of Shawn's husband, Coney, came back? What happened? What not happened? But I want to say that in this novel, all these questions really don't matter. What matters was how Steinbeck depicted the reality of America at that time, and how he used small incident to show the bigger realities in all the due course of the novel. How the ideas were more important than the individual. Tom Joad became an idea. So we don't want so it is not important where goes, but it is more important at what ideas he showed us. Marjod is like a mother goddess, like a perfect example of mother goddess. She will fight everything that life throws to her. And this is how the novel ended. I made this list, but when I started to speak, I just forget all this. So this was my small review of the book. Like this was my first attempt to review a complete book, and I am also learning. I am also trying to be more fluent in the language, and I'm also trying to be more realistic, more passionate, and most of the things come out naturally, and that what's happened. Bear me if there's some mistakes, and definitely this novel, Don Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, gonna stay with me for a long, long period of time. Thank you.